Hello. This is Dr. Joe Green, and just want to share a couple of thoughts that I have just looking at the events that's going on in the world. And most of you, if you ever follow the ministry, you know that we are not. I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I don't label myself as either one of those. I would say, I'm a pastor and more conservative morally, but I try to stick to biblical principles because as believers and followers of Jesus Christ, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to follow the biblical principles. God has called us to be the leaders, and the Bible says we're salt and light, so we're supposed to lead others. We're not supposed to be reactive. We're supposed to be proactive in advancing the cause of Christ and biblical doctrine and the moral values of God. But one of the things I want to share is, and it's become very, very evident, things are coming to a boiling point in this country, in this nation. It's coming to a boiling point. You see a lot of, now part of it is orchestrated. We just have to be honest. There's a lot of rioting and people that are protesting for different reasons. Most people understand that there are people that are actually getting paid to riot in the protest. Has been widely reported from the time of the Trump campaign that other people, more specifically George Soros or the Hillary Clinton campaign, have been seen as they were paying people. People actually admitted they were getting paid to go out and protest and riot and try to incite violence. So, that was to a political gain. And we still see that. The same things are happening. People are really acting up. At the campus of UC Berkeley, there was a big riot because this gentleman was going to speak, Yiannopoulos, whatever his name is. I don't pronounce it that well. So, but he went to speak, and in America we have free speech, and but they rioted and they said they didn't want him there speaking. But the thing that gets me the most is, liberals especially are showing their true colors, and the reason I say that is because everybody wants to be open-minded, and they want they say they're for free thought and free speech, but the only time they say that is when they're in the minority or they're not in control, they don't have the power. Then they want everybody to be open and honest, and you got to love people and accept them for their differences. But when they don't have their way, when you disagree with them, then it's a whole different ball game. And as you see, they're upset with President Trump primarily because he expresses opinions that they don't like, or he says things that maybe bother them. But that defeats the whole purpose of free speech. If the only thing you accept was people that said the same thing that you wanted them to say, then that's pretty ridiculous. But that's where we're at, in this day, in this age, and so we're going to recognize that. But one of the things that from a biblical standpoint and historical standpoint, whenever I share things that come from the Bible, I do it from a historical standpoint because you have to understand that human beings are, that humanity and it follows after patterns. And so the Bible is a book of patterns, and it says that these patterns were given to us as an example so we would know how to live. So when you look at the patterns, you can understand how things work, and you can also understand.
Process called Move On. Its website calls for people to rally against the president-elect. It apparently has ties to billionaire investor and Clinton supporter George Soros too. That's, in fact, according to emails, if you look back to 2008, released by WikiLeaks from Clinton's campaign chairman John Podesta to George Soros. In fact, they gave tips on how to steer American voters. For example, financing groups operating at campaign rallies. Move On was among them.
Outraged by Donald Trump's victory in the presidential election, tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets across the U.S. to protest. Many demonstrators are refusing to accept Trump's victory. It looks like advocacy groups played a hand in organizing the seemingly spontaneous protests. Among them, an organization called Move On, which is funded by George Soros, a Hillary Clinton supporter and billionaire. The day after Trump was elected, the group sent out a press release saying,
"Within 2 hours of the call to action, Move On members had created more than 200 gatherings nationwide, with the number continuing to grow on Wednesday afternoon."
The presidential campaign showed there is no love lost between Donald Trump and George Soros. who was one of Hillary Clinton's. But apparently, Trump's victory in the election didn't stop the Soros organization from campaigning against him.
Those who are stirring it up, and they do, many of them work for George Soros's front organizations, are really telling those innocent protesters and perhaps less innocent protesters that they're in danger, that they're endangered by Trump, even though Trump has done nothing but preach unity since he actually won the elections. In essence, what the opponents of Trump now are doing is exactly what they accused him of planning to do if he lost, which is disputing the results of an entirely fair election. It's an election where they've had all the media power and more of the money, and yet they've lost to him and to the voice of those ordinary people in the American shires who are normally ignored and forgotten.
George Soros is known for stirring up anti-government protests in other countries, and it looks like the upcoming Trump administration might see a few. The Soros organization went beyond protesting. Move On released a petition calling to change the U.S. Constitution and get rid of the Electoral College, which gave Trump his victory. There are now some apparently well-funded attempts to undermine Trump's victory in the election. The irony is that many Clinton backers who are now slamming America's electoral system were praising it and scolding anyone who criticized it just days before the vote. In Washington, I'm
out there paying attention to the game and the world stage for all these years and paying attention to what's happening in Ukraine and trying to figure out the key players behind all the madness that is created. Shocking revelations coming through some mainstream media outlets showing the proof that I've stated all along, that people just did not want to believe that these events in Ferguson and elsewhere have all been staged and backed by the elite, and they're admitting it. George Soros, tied in to so many different things. I could go on and on and on. This billionaire has been caught putting out at least $33 million in 1 year to support already established groups that emboldened the grassroots, on-the-ground activists in Ferguson. Now, this is according to most recent tax filings of his nonprofit Open Society Foundations. So these tax filings have blown this whole thing wide open, showing who has supported this whole orchestration.